Welcome to our program, Mark Toth.
Great to be here, Daniel. Thanks for having me back.
US President Donald Trump urged Vladimir Putin to halt strikes on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and energy grid. He said that he doesn't like Russia's strikes on Ukraine. Also, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that Donald Trump was not interested in long negotiations without any kind of results. Do you see this as a sign that Donald Trump is getting ready to put pressure on Russia and also as his team?
Daniel, it's more than a fair question. I don't know that we know enough yet coming from Trump. In my opinion, the time has passed to be playing these kind of games with Putin. It's clear that these ceasefires, the limited ones that Ukraine agreed to, in terms of the Black Sea itself, refraining from striking Russian energy infrastructure and the like, Russia's not following suit. So how much more do we have to go down this path? How many more kids need to die, such as in the horrific explosion that happened in that playground in Ukraine, before Trump gets it, that Putin is playing games with him? John Sweet and I, my writing partner, who's often on with me on your TV program, we wrote about this, that Putin is just playing for time. He's got a bigger game in mind here. He still wants all of Ukraine. And Trump needs to get stronger and get to this conclusion sooner, that Putin is not going to take negotiations seriously. So while his statements are welcomed, I'm glad that he's saying he's running out of patience, et cetera. They're just not strong enough yet. We've seen enough evidence here. Putin is not going to change. He's going to continue to attack Ukraine. He's going to continue to intentionally attack Ukrainian civilians. And it's finally time for the Trump administration, way past time in my own personal opinion, for the Trump administration to start drawing red lines and saying, we're going to do X, Y, Z to help Ukraine kinetically if you don't get serious about a ceasefire negotiation that's comprehensive.
Also, it's interesting that US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, for the first time, has said that Russia has violated the ceasefire in the air. He says that Trump is not interested in long negotiations without any kind of result, any kind of success, and he would not like to see Russia delaying ceasefire talks. Do you see this as another message to Moscow?
I do. And it is important messaging coming from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, basically saying, look, we see this, we get it. It's you. It's not Ukraine that are committing these ceasefire violations. And again, limited ceasefire negotiations. But I want to see them go one step further. It's not enough just to say you're violating these ceasefire limitations. Russia is taking advantage of it. The ballistic missiles that are coming from the bombers over the Black Sea, which presently under the terms, ceasefire terms, Ukraine can't interdict as easily because they've agreed to limit their operations of Black Sea, are unfair. So I'd rather see Marco Rubio go one step further and call out the Russians for that, to say not only are you violating the ceasefire, you're using the ceasefire to gain an advantage on the battlefield. The same thing in terms of still striking Ukrainian infrastructure and in civilian sites as well. They're doing the same thing. So while it's a welcome first step, if you will, from Marco Rubio, I want to see a stronger statement out of him condemning Russia for using the ceasefire is basically cover for them to just up their game, not diminish it.
Also, according to Reuters, for the first time, Trump's administration has been getting more frustrated about Russia's violation of a ceasefire, about Russia's violation and unwillingness to accept a full ceasefire deal. Also, a path forward is being discussed right now in the White House. According to Reuters, they would discuss how can they force Vladimir Putin to accept full ceasefire deal. Diplomatic and economic options are being on the table right now. How do you see these options of Trump's administration from your perspective? What kind of options they could use this time?
Yeah, the Trump administration has to recognize the nature of the problem. It's not going to be one that's solved with sanctions. Those should already be in place. Russia should be facing the severest sanctions possible. There shouldn't be any loopholes. Europe itself shouldn't be buying any liquefied gas, et cetera, from the Russians. Anything that puts money into the Russian war machine should be stopped. But U.S. trade itself is only about $3.5 billion at this point with Russia, so it's minimal. What Russia is going to respect, the only thing that's going to drag Putin kicking and screaming to the table, as John Sweet often says, and I often write with him, is a kinetic punch to the mouth to Putin. And that means arming Ukraine more efficiently, letting Ukraine interdict way deep behind Russian lines. He's going to have to get a bloody punch to the face before he comes to the negotiation table in good faith. Right now, Trump's not doing that. If Trump's best card at this point is to say we're simply going to do more sanctions, then I don't think you're going to see anything different change on the battlefield. I mean, as I look at it, as John and I last surveyed the battlefield, what we see, and we concur with what President Zelensky is saying, we see Russia potentially taking some operational pauses. Their gains are marginal in terms of advancements. And in the Donbass, is it does look like they are preparing for a multi-front counteroffensive, or offensive, if you will, would be a better way of putting it, in the Sumy and Kharkiv Oblast. And you're seeing some of that preparatory work already happening in Kupiansk in terms of some Russian advancements there. And so from that standpoint, Team Trump has got to understand that sanctions aren't going to stop that. Putin has a method to his madness. He wants to continue an offensive. He's preparing for that offensive, and sanctions won't get you there. It's going to take more military aid, better intel still going to the Ukrainians, and just taking the handcuffs off them so that they can fight the Russians wherever they are. I mean, the ceasefire is a farce. Those restrictions should be lifted. Russia was starting to hurt as it was, given the attacks on their energy infrastructure. And if you can interdict that gas before it can arrive in a Russian tank, all the better.
From your perspective, when can Trump administration reach this point? After that, after which they will have to say, like, we have imposed economic diplomatic pressure on Russia, but it doesn't work. When could we reach this another breaking point, turning point, after which Trump administration will finally impose also military options? Because it seems like there is only discussion about diplomatic economic means, but we haven't heard any kind of statement from the Trump's administration, any kind of a discussion about the possibility of imposing and using military means of power, for example, providing Ukraine with military equipment, allowing to strike Russia, or even considering US military using military options. When could the Trump's administration also consider this type of pressure on Putin?
Yeah, Dan, you're exactly right to raise this, because we're not seeing that yet. And I don't think you're going to see it. I think if someone wants to look at tea leaves to see when that culminating point happens, it'll be when Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the Mideast, but who's been negotiating on behalf of the Trump administration with Putin, when that guy goes, he doesn't understand the game that he's in. He's way too placating of Putin. He's way too complimentary of Putin. He's bought into it. And right now, what you're basically still seeing is kind of an economic standoff between the U.S. and Russia. You've got Steve Witkoff on the U.S. side, who is basically a commercial real estate developer. This is not a man with any military background, no understanding of military realities on the ground, no understanding of what Ukraine needs in order to win on the ground. He's the wrong guy to have this. General Kellogg would have been a better person as that point guard, but he's not. The Russians didn't want to have him at the table. And then on the flip side, you've seen this growing influence of Kirill, and I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but Kirill Dmitriev, the head of the Russian Sovereign Fund, who is also Putin's chief economic advisor, if you will. He's on the flip side of that table these days with Witkoff. And that's telling you that we're still stuck in an economic kind of discussion or negotiation, and we're not in a military one where we're trying to say to Russia, these are the realities you're going to face on the ground. I'd like to see them, Witkoff gone as fast as he can be gone. And then for Trump to pull a game changer, something that would shock Putin into saying, wow, this did change. I've gone too far. I read Trump and his intention to back up Ukraine if I didn't go to the ceasefire negotiations. And there are lots of ways to do that. And just one, because I know you wanted to get into some economic topics as well, just one would be implementing a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine that would safeguard Ukrainian cities, stop these horrible attacks on Ukrainian civilians, as well as allow Ukraine to push up some of those air defense assets into the actual front lines of this war.
Do you feel that General Kellogg still has a success to Donald Trump's office, to his cabinet in the White House, to the Oval Office? It seems like he has been excluded from negotiations between US, Russia, and Ukraine. What is his position right now in the Trump's inner circle?
Sadly, it's diminished, Daniel. It's clear that he doesn't have the ear that he once had. It's important to be in the room. And at this point, and again, I don't mean this to demean the general. He certainly has served our country well, but he's become more of a messenger boy. He's more of someone that is shuttling back and forth between Zelensky and the White House, but just basically communicating what the White House wants to see. And that's a waste of General Kellogg's talents. General Kellogg really should be the one that's facing down the Russians. That's who you want. And if you're not going to have General Kellogg doing that, you need another general, a General Petraeus, someone that you've interviewed, Ben Hodges, someone I believe you've also interviewed. I know you have. You need those type of guys in the room negotiating with the Russians because they can call their bluff. It should have been Kellogg, but Putin was able to get Trump to cave on that point. Witkoff is not going to be successful in those negotiations. As long as Steve Witkoff, is in this picture, I don't see this becoming anything more than an economic negotiation process, whereas it really needs to already be a military one to say, these are the realities. Putin, you cannot win. We've assessed that. The outgoing theater commander, the U.S. theater commander, Cavalielli, General Cavalielli, has made that clear that Ukraine is not going to lose this war. Ukraine is in it. It's bloody. It's a stalemate. It's costly to both sides. But Ukraine's not going to lose. And Putin needs to hear that message because I don't think he's hearing it internally. I don't think he's willing to accept it personally. And I think it's going to take someone of a military stature to get through to him to say enough is enough. You're going to either come to the peace table and do a real negotiation and find something that's equitable, or you're going to face further military consequences from the U.S. via Ukraine.
Let's cover also economic news around the globe and Donald Trump's tariffs. U.S. President Donald Trump has imposed tariffs against almost all countries around the globe, except Russia and maybe some other countries. But these tariffs vary from 10 to even 30% on the imported goods. What is your reaction to this, and how do you see the main consequences of this decision for the global trade, global economy right now?
Daniel, I'm a former economist. It's been decades since I've actively practiced it, but I know enough to be dangerous here still. And basically, this whole approach that Trump has taken, it's nonsensical. It makes no sense. When you look at the actual formula that came up with these so-called tariffs to be charged, one, you have like the 10%, which is affecting a lot of countries, which is basically just like a cover charge. Who knows where that number came up with? It's not based on actual deficits, et cetera, with any given country. Some countries actually, the U.S. has a trading surplus with. And so they're being just penalized for doing business with the U.S. That makes no sense. Kind of like a cover charge at a bar or discotheque. But then you have the heart of it, which is what the markets have reacted to so strongly. It's completely nonsensical. It's essentially taking a given country's, the U.S. has a trade deficit with a XYZ country. And you're dividing that by the amount of imports from that country to the U.S. And you're coming up with this percentage. Well, that has nothing to do with the actual tariffs that country's charging. It's just a nonsensical number. And then to get the so-called Trump discount, you're dividing it by two to come up with another number that's even further from any basis that any kind of economist can get their hands around. So it's absurd in that regard. I kind of liken the overall thing that what Trump is doing here. It's ill-advised. It's wrong. To kind of like you had Putin declared his special military operation on Ukraine. And it was a stupid move on Russia's part. It has damaged their economy. It's been self-defeating. It has marginalized them in terms of trade with the West, et cetera. I think Trump is, and metaphorically speaking, has declared the same kind of war against our trading partners and allies with no differentiation whatsoever between friend and foe. It's just applicable to everybody, save Russia and save North Korea, to the extent where it's just self-defeating. The problem that I see in terms of the global impact is he didn't recognize that the markets would go this far. I mean, they've crashed. I mean, as of Saturday, the markets have just opened today. So I don't really want to comment today since they may move quickly. But this is Saturday, 25%, the stock market in the U.S. lost close to $6-7 trillion of value. That's 25% of U.S. GDP on an annualized basis. So that's a COVID-like hit. That's huge. So it's affecting the stock markets greatly. China has come to play. Here's this foe that Trump says, I want to fight. I want to take, I want to pivot to China. They're the main pacing threat, militarily speaking. They're the main economic threat. And yet China has come to play. They've imposed their own. It will come into effect April 10th. They've imposed their own 34% tariffs in retaliation. The markets weren't expecting that. They were thinking it might be a negotiation process. They've started to eliminate more rare earth minerals that the U.S. vitally needs for defense and for its own manufacturing and the like. And also, they've done a lot of outreach to EU countries, to U.S. allies in the Indo-Pacific, to Japan and to South Korea, saying, hey, let's work together to thwart these tariffs. So the Trump administration, whether they want to admit it or not, is on the back heel. And it could have, potentially disastrous consequences, a recession in the U.S., which would likely spread elsewhere if Trump doesn't reverse course. But I don't see any signs yet that he's willing to do it, at least at the point that we're taping this. I think the markets, though, are starting to scream at him internally, domestically here in the U.S. You've got guys like Bill Ackerman, who it was a big supporter of Trump getting elected, saying, look, you're destroying global confidence in the U.S. economy and U.S. trade. You also have someone who's very influential, Jamie Dimon, who's the head of JP Morgan, the largest banking group in the U.S., saying, look, this can't stand either. So you're starting to see the pushback. It's just a question of whether or not Trump will allow this damage to continue or if he'll eat some crow here.
Does it mean that Donald Trump has no choice but to finally reverse this decision on tariffs against all countries around the globe?
In my personal opinion, he's going to have to get to that point because everything we've talked to date, we really don't have the EU itself weighing in. The EU has said that we're going to retaliate, but we don't know what those percentages are. So that hasn't shocked the stock markets as well yet. Now, I will say, if you look, and this kind of gets deep in the reeds, if you will, of economy, if you look at the markets, it looks like Europe is betting that the impact to the U.S. is going to be worse on the impact to the EU. Still bad. You've got Poland, for instance, saying, I think it may cost them 4 or 5% of GDP. But at this point, the markets, the last time I checked, were suggesting it might be 5-7% of U.S. GDP. So you're seeing Europe thinking, wait, we may have a slight advantage here. It's just a question of how they play it. Now, I know Ukraine, just as a quick aside here, Ukraine has said they're not going to reciprocate. But there is some silver lining here for Ukraine. I mean, your trade is minimal as is. But given that China is taking these rare earth minerals off the table and that the U.S. needs us vitally for defense, and Ukraine has many of these rare earth minerals, yes, they still need to be mined. They still need to be extracted. That may actually give you more leverage in this mineral deal that was going the other way, where Trump was trying to get Ukraine to do something, in my opinion, would be foolish for Ukraine to do, which would be to basically concede a lot of the ownership to the U.S. I think Ukraine should stand firm in saying that's not fair. An equitable deal is okay, but not one that is disadvantageous to our long-term economic security.
Can any country in the world benefit from this decision of Donald Trump on imposing tariffs against all countries? Can anyone win after this situation during these times of global trade war?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really depends what your time frame is. China, I suspect, if you're Chinese President Xi Jinping, you may not have a win today, but in his mind, I believe they think they've got a winning hand 5-10 years out. that this is something that is destroying global confidence in the U.S. markets. People are going to question whether or not they can trust the U.S. to invest their sovereign funds in, et cetera, invest in U.S. businesses and the like. And even in the defense sectors, as we've seen with what Trump has been saying to NATO, et cetera, about not backing up those commitments and arguing that maybe Europe should be more European-centric in terms of buying planes and weapon systems going forward to deter any future Russian threat. So I would argue if there's a winner, it's a long-term winner, and it would be China if Trump doesn't reverse course. I think this has gone too far. The damage is too great for it to be a U.S. win. I think other countries sense blood in the water. And certainly at this point, and again, we're early in on this, so it's kind of hard. We got to be careful of the fog of a trade war here. But early on, as I was saying, China's come to play. And one of the other things that they were doing, one of the benefits to the U.S. was the devaluation of the dollar. It was falling, but I was noticing today on the markets, China looks to be taking measures to devalue the yuan. So they're not going to give that advantage either to the U.S. So I think Trump has way overplayed his hand because he's not going to be around for 5-10 years. And whereas Xi or someone like Xi in China will be, I could see China coming out the winner in this, sadly, because that's just foolish. And that just goes against everything that this Trump administration said. If China's the threat, if that's the main pacing enemy of the U.S., why have we handed them this kind of easy victory? It's all self-defeating, all self-inflicted.
Thank you, Mark, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, for your insightful answers, and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to Ukraine, and stay strong. Ukraine's going to win this. I believe it.